Welcome back to another episode of the Inquisitive Mamba podcast. This is episode 32. We have a lot to get into in today's show, but first off, we have to introduce our guest. His name is Max Goodman. Max Goodman is a Sports Illustrated writer. He writes for the Yankees. He is a New York sports reporter, and he's here to join the show. So, without further ado, introduce yourself, Max.
Oh yeah, you said it. I'm Max. I cover the Yankees. I also run the Jets site, so technically I cover them too. I am born and raised in Manhattan. I went to Northwestern University and studied journalism there. And geez, both my parents are performing artists, so that's why I'm interested in journalism and kind of entertainment in a sense. Because when I learned I didn't want to end up pursuing athletics because I wasn't quite good enough to be completely honest. I kind of fused my love for sports and their ability to entertain and be on camera and on stage and such, and that blossomed into what I ended up pursuing. So I love what I do and happy to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, so first of all, we have to get started, and there's some breaking news this morning that happened. Yankees re-signed Aaron Boone to a 3-year contract. So I got to ask you, since you cover the Yankees and you report for them, so what were your initial thoughts when you saw that news? Because I know Cashman broke that news in a press conference this morning. Talking about the team's future and what they're going to do with Gary Sanchez, and now Aaron Boone is back on a 3-year deal. So let me know. Tell me your thoughts about that.
Well, I think a lot of fans have been calling for Boone to be fired and let go for much of his tenure here because uh, let's be frank. What fans want is a World Series, and so when the drought with not just the Yankees but all of New York, it's continued to go on and on for many years now. So even if Boone has a historically good regular season record as a manager, that 500 record in the postseason and not even getting to the World Series is really what has fans feeling resentment toward him.
Hmm.
So as much as that's the case, I wasn't particularly surprised when we heard this morning
Hmm.
because I think that a lot of the blame for, and maybe blame is a too negative of a term, but the
Hmm.
reason why the Yankees haven't had that success that we're accustomed to when we look back to 2009, obviously, and the late 90s as well, is I think it's a mix of the players and those above Aaron Boone in the front office and the analytics department and such. So in terms of the players, there's a lot of injuries and underperforming and key
Hmm.
contributors that haven't exactly
Yeah.
lived up to the expectations that maybe we've seen in spurts or in past years, but they haven't gelled completely as one unit at the same time. And then the roster construction as a whole, I mean, you bring in a certain group and maybe the chemistry wasn't as good, or maybe
Right.
the the guys all the way, above Cashman, Hal
Hmm.
Steinbrenner or whoever else is in charge, they weren't willing to pay for a certain player or they picked the wrong one. And it's just that mix of guys in pinstripes just hasn't worked out so far. And there's a lot of unforeseen circumstances, a lot of adversity these last couple of years
Hmm.
with the pandemic, obviously a shortened season. Anything can happen in the playoffs too. So the fact that they've been making the playoffs consistently is key. But I do think that Boone can bring this team a championship. It's just
Hmm.
a matter of bringing in the right guys, making
Right.
the right decisions, and being smart with the amount of money that they're spending.
Now, the first thing I have to ask you is what's the future like for Gary Sanchez? Because I know Cashman said this morning that he could be in the future plans. Obviously, he's gotten better defensively, but he was also saying that we don't know if he's going to be our catcher for next year. I mean, there's a lot of hype around Gary Sanchez, when he came into the league, but it just seems like he's a batting a 210, 220 type of guy. He gets hurt all the time, and I think they should move on from him. So, what do you think about that?
Well, you're not alone. I think a lot of fans are ready to move on from him in a similar way to Boone. I think there was a lot of hype surrounding Sanchez when he first got there, and he was really, really good early on. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, his ability to hit home runs as a catcher, he's one of the best in the game at that. But like
Right.
you said, I mean, he doesn't hit for average. Sometimes he's not on the field, and I think it's pretty telling that Kyle Higashioka is starting a lot of big games that the Yankees just don't have that complete trust in him when it really matters, when you have your ace on the mound. But I do think that it's worth noting, as much as Cashman did allude to the fact that they're going to evaluate Sanchez this offseason, he did also talk about just how proud
Mhm.
he is with how much Sanchez has grown these last couple of years, dealing with adversity and trying new things and trying to get better on defense. And maybe the improvements aren't as noteworthy as a top prospect turning into a superstar, but incrementally he has gotten better behind the plate. The framing is slowly starting to get better. The blocking is okay. He's getting used to the
Mhm.
one knee down stance,
Right.
and his arm is elite. So when he
Yeah.
throws players out when they're trying to steal, he's up there with the best in the game at that. So I don't think that they're going to go out and make a move out of desperation. There are
Right.
other positions that they should definitely focus on more so. I think shortstop is right up there as well. Um,
Yeah.
but
That's my next
yeah,
that's my next thing I want to get into is shortstop. So,
sure.
shortstop here. I'm hearing a lot about Carlos Correa, Corey Seager, but we still have to pay Aaron Judge. So, and you still have Gleyber Torres on the roster. You got Gio Urshela, you got LeMahieu, and now Andujar is gone. Is that correct?
Well, Andujar's still there. He just was hurt for a lot
Okay.
of the time. I think he's in arbitration this year again.
I saw that. So okay, so then what are you gonna do? You're gonna move on from Gleyber Torres, and you're just gonna automatically, magically appear, Corey Seager and or Carlos Correa or Trevor Story, because I know the Yankees were linked to Trevor Story at the trade deadline, but they didn't want to go through with that because of the farm system and how much they were willing to give up for him, and he's a free agent in the offseason. So what do you think about? Are we gonna move on from Gleyber Torres, or is he staying put?
Well, I think the Yankees have three options at shortstop. And before I even get into that, Gleyber Torres is going to move to second base, I think,
Hmm.
pretty much full time at this point.
Right.
Cashman said today, Tuesday, that in retrospect, it was a mistake to have him be at short, and that maybe he's not necessarily ready to be there.
Hmm.
And all year, pretty much, it was talked about how he was pressing, taking the offensive struggles to the field and the defensive struggles to the plate and back and forth.
Right.
So I think he'll be at second base. And look, the potential is so high for him. He's only 24, right? So
Yeah.
he could still transition into a really elite second baseman moving forward, considering he hit
Absolutely.
38, 36 home runs earlier in his career.
Yeah.
But the
Last year
three
he had.
options are
Yeah, last year he had 38 home runs. You're correct. Yeah.
so they could stick to the status quo, which is really just, maybe you have Urshela play shortstop, maybe you have Velasquez play shortstop, or you figure out something because they do have a couple top prospects in the farm system that are maybe a year or two away, but they're believed to be one of the best prospects in their system, the kind of players that you're going to want to play shortstop in the long term, which then
Mhm.
brings me to the second point. You go out and you pay a ton of money for a top guy like Seager, Story, or Correa, or Marcus Simeon, or Javi Baez, any of those guys, but it's going to take quite the investment. And like you mentioned, you got to pay Aaron Judge, you got to
Mhm.
continue to pay Garrett Cole and Giancarlo Stanton. There's a lot of money that has to go around. Even LeMahieu's contract is pretty big. So
Right, and he only signed
uh,
a 2-year deal, right?
I think it was a 6 year deal.
Was it? Okay, all right. Well, then he's still on the books
Initially, he
then.
signed a 2 year deal.
Yeah.
They extended him. Yeah.
And
Um,
yep.
And the third option, which I listed three at the beginning, but I'm blanking on what the third one was. I think the third one was um, to maybe either make a trade or,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, the prospects. It's Oswald Peraza and Anthony Volpe.
Yeah.
And those
I don't
guys
think you
are
mentioned that. Yeah.
highly touted. They did really well in the minors, but they're
Mhm.
both incredibly young and not necessarily ready for the spotlight just yet. So you got to bridge the gap till then. Oh, that's the third one. You find a stopgap. You
Yeah.
sign a veteran like Andrelton Simmons or
I don't even like
Jose
that.
Iglesias, those kinds of guys that are really good on defense
Mhm.
and can fill in for a year and just give you a reliable shortstop. They're not going to hit, you
Right.
know, 20, 30 home runs, but they're
No.
going to do the job on defense and it would
Absolutely.
then help your team. And it would be pretty affordable as well.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I think that'd be probably like a 1-year, $8 million deal, something like that, which they've got plenty of money for. But I just don't know if you go out and you go and pay a Carlos Correa or you go and pay a Corey Seager. I don't know. I just think that's you're committed. You're committed to a lot, and you still have a lot more other things to worry about. So I think that's it for the infield. Now moving on to the outfield. So I've seen some things about Clint Frazier. Is he coming back next year? Because I mean, this guy has been up and down, up and down, up and down, sent to the minors, back and forth, back and forth. And when he plays, he's pretty productive. So what are your thoughts on Frazier returning to the Yankees in the season of 2021, 2022?
yeah, this year was it had a lot of highs and lows for Clint because he was finally recognized as a starting left fielder breaking
Right.
camp and heading into the regular season and he really hadn't had an opportunity that was, a full-time gig where he was recognized as a starter before in his career. And there were all the off the field issues, the way he interacted with the media even before I got to the beat and I started in
Mhm.
2020. So, a lot of fans, I was even excited to see how he was going to do because he had been positioning himself for an opportunity. And then
Yeah.
the injuries really just derailed his season. And at this point, I don't think we really even know what exactly is going on. I mean,
No.
vertigo was thrown out there, but then he didn't officially have vertigo. And the way that Cashman referred to it today was dizziness and fogginess. So maybe it's something with his vision or something
Mhm.
related to the concussions that he's had in the past. Um, I don't know
Does
if you
does
follow Clint
Yeah.
Frazier on Twitter, but he tweeted about
Mhm.
the fact that there have been inaccurate reports
Mhm.
about his injuries over the
Right.
course of this year. And I think he's very vocal on social media when he
Mhm.
actually does log in and fire off some tweets and such. So I think that if he ever does speak out, maybe through like the Players Tribune or a certain reporter that he feels comfortable with, maybe
Mhm.
he'll give an even more in-depth look as to what's exactly going on. But I don't know. It's hard to say if he'll be back. I mean, he's I think he's under contract. It's
He's
not
still
like
very
he's
young too. I mean,
gonna
we
sign.
traded for him. We got him in the Chapman trade. Is that correct from the Indian, right?
It was the Andrew
Andrew
Miller
Miller,
trade.
Andrew Miller, that's what it was. Yeah. So, I mean, I think he has a bright future. And my last point about the outfield I want to make is is Brett Gardner coming back? Because I mean, I don't understand with him. He's what? It's his 16th year for the Yankees last year. I think he's just atrocious. But that's just me. So,
Well, it was his worst year numbers wise in a
yep.
lot of categories, and he's 38 years old. But to play devil's advocate, because you seem to think he shouldn't be back, I'll just argue that he should.
Yeah.
He's incredibly durable, and he was able to fill in
Hmm.
literally all season long with Aaron Hicks being out and Frazier and Duhar, all those guys missing time. And honestly, I mean, you're getting what you expect from somebody at that age. Like they wouldn't be bringing him back to
Hmm.
be a Giancarlo Stanton in
Right.
terms of
No.
production. So he goes out there, he plays hard, he can still run pretty well and steal a bag if he needs to, maybe run into a home run or two.
Hmm.
And as much as the production might not be top notch for a fourth or fifth outfielder on a roster, I think the experience and the leadership is pretty valuable too when you have a younger team with a lot of inexperience. And even the older guys, I think that they really bond with him. We aren't in the clubhouse these last couple of years because of COVID, but
Right.
from interacting with him and the couple other players that I've talked to in depth over the course of this year, I think that he really fits in well with this group.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a good veteran for I guess some of the younger guys, and from what I've seen, and as you saying, he's a good guy to be around. But at some point, you just have to figure, is he fit to be on a championship roster? Because I look at I got the Dodgers and I got the Astros and the Red Sox, who are just light. It just seems like they're light years ahead of us from I don't know. It just seems that way. So is he built to be on a championship roster? Yeah, I think for the bench, but not starting.
of course, and he wasn't necessarily supposed to be a starter
Right.
at the beginning of this past year either. It was just the unforeseen circumstances. I don't know what we're going to get out of. I don't know what the Yankees will get out of Aaron Hicks when he comes back from his injury. There are a
Yeah.
lot of question marks as there are every year. But if you have a spot on your roster for a fourth or fifth outfielder and he takes a pay cut, maybe even more,
Right.
uh, I think that it would be potentially pretty smart to bring him back for off the field reasons, and on the field too. I mean, I'm not trying to you know
Right.
disqualify him for what he's done with this
He
organization. I
just
mean,
can't.
you look at
Aaron
a lot
Hicks
of
can't stay healthy.
that's also true, and I mean
That's
now
another issue.
they have Joey Gallo now in left pretty much full time. I think so. Uh,
That's another guy.
if
Don't
you
even
have
get me
him
started about
and
him. He needs to go packing. He bats like 215 and he's all power. That's the problem with the Yankees, Max. Is we're all about power. We have nobody that can actually get on base. That's been our main problem all year. Remember when they brought in Tim LeCastro? They signed or they brought him in. He was a good speedy guy. He looked really good in that Astros series early on when we came back and won. And then we blew so many leads during the regular season. It was a joke. It was such a roller coaster. Then we went on a 13-game win streak, and then we just got absolutely embarrassed in Fenway 2 weeks ago. So it was just a roller coaster of emotions for Yankees fans. As you know, you covered it, but I think speed kills in baseball. It's a recipe of getting on base. Look what the Red Sox have done. They've hit a lot of grand slams, but guess what? Their guys can get on base. Doesn't seem like any of ours can actually get on base. Judge and Stanton were carrying the Yankees all the way down the stretch towards the end of the year. You can't have that. Glaber's got to step up. And LeMahieu getting hurt with the sports hernia was huge. So I just think we have the talent for sure. And our bullpen surprisingly came out of nowhere and did wonders. And our starting pitching was abysmal. Outside of Garrett Cole, Severino came down the stretch late, which was nice. I'm hoping to see him to start next year as a full time starter. I'm sure you are as well. So I think that's my inside take on the Yankees.
Well, I think it all comes back to roster construction as you were going through it. I
Yep.
mean, you're investing in these players that are very at times one dimensional, and you're relying too much on the home run ball. And that's at
Absolutely.
least what you were arguing there. Um, I think that we've seen in spurts guys like Joey Gallo be game wreckers and totally carry a team for a couple of days. There was that one stretch that had been in like early September or so, and he was really good. He was hitting home runs almost every day and getting on base. But when
Hmm.
someone like that struggles, it's really glaring because they rely so much on the home run ball. So, yeah, I really like the pickup of Tim LeCastro, and we'll see if he's back next year, comes back healthy from the knee injury. Um, so that goes in line with going back to the shortstop thing. You got to find the guys that fit on the roster and can complement the players like Judge and Stanton who
Hmm.
are going to drive in the runs in the middle of your lineup. And those are tough decisions to make because if you bring in the wrong people, like we've seen recently, you're not going to win a championship. And so, I mean, the Red Sox are playing so well right now because they're just jiving as a group and they have a lot
They're hot
of
at the right
chemistry
time.
and guys that are stepping up and on the biggest stage. And the Astros have such a good, balanced, dynamic offense,
Hmm.
but we're seeing their pitching staff is kind of failing them right now. So
Very bad.
it's challenging to build a championship caliber team, but then you got to actually go out there and perform as well. So that's like my very first answer: the mix between bringing in the right players and having them perform at the same time.
So moving on quickly about the Dodgers, the Red Sox, and the other teams, the Astros, set aside from the Yankees. They pay for their players as well, but it just seems like they gel so well together. And I don't know. I just think that we have some work to do this offseason. I really do. The Red Sox are hot at the right time, obviously with Kike Hernandez. He's been there for the Dodgers before. He's done it. JD Martinez, is another really solid guy. Verdugo has stepped up crazy for them. Then you got Bogarts. Then you got Devers. So it just seems like one, two, three, four. But the thing about that is all those guys can get on base. They're not the fastest guys, but they can hit for base hits. They don't have to hit the home run ball and every single time. Set aside from a guy like Schwarber and Hunter Renfroe, they're big home run hitter guys. They bat 230 to 240, but they don't have to worry about getting on base because they got other guys that can help out for them. So I don't know. It just seems like the Red Sox are run better as a team as of late, as you've seen that if they get their core has been to what 4 World Series and this if he in his last what 4 years.
I guess if you count the Astros
Yeah,
too.
and
Um,
this will be his second. If he wins, this will be his second in 4 years. That just goes to show you. And I mean, I don't know if he's a better manager than Boone. I mean, you probably can say he is, but I just think that, like you said, their roster is constructed a lot better than ours.
but that's the best part about baseball, right?
Yep.
Because just a couple of weeks ago, the Yankees were dominating the Red Sox and they swept them at Fenway. So
I know.
as much as you can argue that the Yankees are flawed and they're bad and they're not
Right.
going to compete with teams like Boston, they did, and they
Hmm.
started. It was 0-7 against them this year, and they battled back. They only had a 9-10 record against them when it was all said and done. So there was a stretch there where they were playing really, really well, but the inconsistencies will come back and bite you. When all they needed was one more win to host that wild card game, and you can go down a pretty lengthy list of all the collapses and the gut wrenching losses that they had over the course of the year. So hindsight's 2020, but
Absolutely.
they are really close to
Very.
being the team that can get over the hump. And I don't think it's bold to say that you make a couple moves and you bring in the right hitting coach and their base coach
Hmm.
and whatever other moves they make this offseason, and they're automatically a favorite to win the AL East. Like they're
Absolutely.
right there, but this is a big offseason.
It for some reason, like last year, the Red Sox, they weren't even on the map. This year the Yankees and the Red Sox are both on the map. It just seems like there's a trend of Red Sox are up one year, Yankees are up. It just seems like, going back and forth. And then the Blue Jays really surprised me. I mean, I expected the Rays, obviously. That's Moneyball over there. Kevin Cash is an absolute genius, even though they got outplayed by the Red Sox. And I think it showed because of, they didn't have the run support like they did in the regular season, and they were missing Tyler Glass now. And I think one other starter. I don't really follow the Rays like that just because I think they're boring, but I think they're like the San Antonio Spurs of basketball.
That's a decent comp. Yeah. I mean, the regular season doesn't always tell you what you're going to do in the postseason,
Nope.
and losing Glasnow was huge, like you mentioned. But um, they're going to be there every year going forward because
Yeah.
they're able to figure out what the best product is and figure out what the equation is that's going to equal wins. And they always seem to beat up on the Yankees, at least in recent history. I think the Blue Jays are going to be really good really soon
Yes.
if they can nail down their bullpen and their pitching
Hmm.
staff. But they really surprised me a lot too. Their young core is incredible. So it's the best division in baseball. I think
Absolutely.
not too long from now we might be talking about Baltimore being up and coming too.
Oh gosh,
Uh,
they're
maybe in a
atrocious,
couple
but
years.
you might not be wrong. So yeah, I think that that covers it for the Yankees. So I think my next thing is I want to ask you some hot takes for the offseason coming up for the Yankees. Do you think maybe who we will sign? Obviously, we just brought back Boone. What are we doing with Anthony Rizzo and Voit? What's that whole situation like? So maybe leave a hot take on the offseason because everyone's expecting a big offseason.
Yeah, I honestly haven't really thought through it yet. I can totally come up with something, but
Yeah,
I don't have like a whole storyline mapped out yet because it's
yeah,
still so fresh. I mean,
it
the
is. I
the
mean, the
2 weeks have
postseason's still
flown
going
by.
on. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody does yet.
And it's worth noting that the CBA and the negotiations with the league and the Players
Hmm.
Association, like that could change a lot of things, depending on where the luxury tax is too. But I'll go through some of the stuff you mentioned. I don't really see them signing Correa because of the
I don't
history
either.
there. As
I
much as
agree. I
he's
agree.
as much as he's arguably the best shortstop on the market. I
Unless
mean, and
Garrett Cole recruits him though, because you know how like NFL and NBA play, and guys can set aside their differences. You've seen that in recent years in clubhouses. So
yeah, it's just I my first time around the Yankees was 2020 spring training, right
hmm,
after the sign stealing stuff came
yeah,
out, and I wasn't asking many questions at that point because I was so new. But just listening
right,
to all those guys, Judge, Glaber, Gary, all of
hmm,
them, Severino,
right,
just talking about like they really were not happy with the Astros, and Correa is a leader on that team. So there would have to be a lot of,
yeah,
I don't know, you have to cut the differences and really like bond between those two parties to figure
absolutely,
that out. But then, you look at someone like Corey Seager, as much as he made the error the other night, he hits for contact. He's a decent defender, and he's a left-handed hitter. I think that he's much
yeah,
more of the profile of the player that they need. But I'm also not it's not that bold of a take, but I guess it is. I don't think that they sign a big name shortstop at this point. I don't, because I think that they really need to invest their money elsewhere. If Rizzo is willing to come back, that would be a really big get for them, unless they could trade for somebody like
hmm,
Matt Olson or another big left-handed hitter that they can
hmm,
rely on. Um,
yeah,
Void is under contract. His value is so low after the injuries, so I'm
yeah.
not sure that a team would really give a lot to get him. And
He's
when
very
he's
streak.
healthy, he is
Yeah,
still
he's very
exactly, yeah.
streaky, very streaky.
At times, he's one of the best hitters in the game, simply put. So maybe
Yeah,
you go into this season with Void at first, LeMahieu at third,
hmm,
because now he's healthy again. He had the surgery, so he should be good to go for next season. Glaber at second, and then either a veteran that they signed for a cheap deal that's going to give you good defense. Or, I mean, Urshela did a pretty good job at short too, and he
hmm.
wasn't healthy the whole season
No,
either.
he
So
wasn't.
maybe you start the season with that. That's not really that bold of a take, but it's kind of what they had this year.
Yeah,
Um, but they do need to, if that's your infield, then you got to figure that they signed a catcher or they signed a starting pitcher or something like that,
right.
because there are a multitude of different
Well,
ways they can go about
the
it with all
thing
the
the thing
positions
is
they need
though
to
is
address.
there's not a lot of good catchers in the MLB. I mean, when you think about it, you got Sanchez, you got Posey, you got Real Muto, you got Grandal, but I mean, a lot of those guys aren't. I mean, it's just there's just the catcher position seems like the tight end position in the NFL. There's not a lot of good tight ends. You know what I mean? So I think that maybe you stick with Gary, you know. So, but I think that
And they love Kyle
mhm,
Higashioka too.
they
I
do.
think
He's really
he's
good defensively. He's
he's
just not very good offensively.
right. But I mean, he has his moments, and he's known Garrett Cole for forever. So that's important that you can put your ace in a good position to succeed.
Hmm.
It really resonated with me that a lot of different pitchers have praised Gary Sanchez for
Yeah,
his improvements on defense, like I was talking about earlier. Like Jordan Montgomery, who had a really good year,
he did.
always seemed to want Gary behind the plate for him,
Hmm.
which says a lot. I mean, if the pitchers were lobbying to get rid of him, I think that they would, trade him immediately. But if you could get him on he's in arbitration, I believe. If you get him for not too bad of a deal and you just go into this, I mean, that's the thing though. Are the Yankees complacent with potentially waiting another year before a title? Like you have to be mindful of the fact that you have the prime years of
Yeah, you got
Judge, Cole,
Judge.
Stanton,
Yes. Hmm.
and
Every
those
year the
guys aren't
window
going to get any
closes
younger.
as you go
Right.
on, and Mayhew's getting older. Chapman's getting older. Kluber, are we? What are we doing with Kluber? He was on a 1 year deal, correct?
I believe he's a free agent. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think they
Um,
bring him back? No.
I mean, he threw a no hitter, which was
Right.
awesome, and he had a stretch there where he was really good.
Can't stay healthy
But
either.
I think that if you could, with what they were able to get out of someone like Nestor Cortez, and with the way that this organization has found pitching recently, with the trades for Clay Holmes and Wandy Peralta were awesome for this team.
Yeah, I didn't
Uh,
even expect that. Clay Holmes, he started off rocky and then he just kind of lit it up. Wandy Peralta
yeah,
was good down the stretch too. I don't think anybody expected that bullpen to get to where it was at the end towards the end of the season.
and that's credit to Matt Blake and his staff. They did a
Yep.
really good job
Zach
getting
Britton
the
can go
best.
packing.
Well, he's out for pretty much the whole year, I think.
Yeah,
So
he
you don't have to
he
worry
was
about
too
that.
inconsistent. Now he was another one. All right, so moving on from the MLB. Before we do that, there's four teams left, obviously in the postseason. The Yankees aren't one of them, sadly. But we got the Braves, Astros, Red Sox, and Dodgers. Who do you have winning the World Series and why?
Well, it's easy for me to say Braves, Red Sox because they're up in their
Hmm.
divisions,
Right, or the series.
in
Yeah.
their
Hmm.
series. Yeah. I don't see the Astros coming back with the pitching woes.
I
I
agree.
mean, the Red Sox are just beating down on them at this point,
Yeah,
and
and
it's hard to count out the Dodgers,
their pitching staff's not even that good. The Red
right?
Sox.
And that's why maybe now that you mentioned that, I think I'd give the edge to the NL team if it's the Braves that go through. I mean, they do have some really good starters: Max Fried, Ian
Hmm.
Anderson, Charlie Morton, guy that the Rays let go that they probably shouldn't have.
Astros let go of too.
And yeah, and even if the Dodgers are the team that gets to the World Series, their
Hmm.
pitching is pretty darn good too. So I would lean NL regardless of who it is, but I'll stick with the Braves. They just seem like they have it going right now. I have a friend that works for them too, so
Okay.
I guess I'm like sort of on the bandwagon because I have nothing else to, I have no ties with any of those four teams. So
Hmm.
as a fan, unbiased, I guess I'll take the Braves.
It just seems like everything has gone right for the Red Sox. They beat up on the Yankees in the wild card. Then they dominated the Rays in the ALDS division series, and then they're dominating the Astros. I think, in my opinion, and everything's gone perfect for them because they've gone 1-1 in both of those big series. So you win one game on the road, then you come home and you have the advantage because you can easily go up 3-1. So even tonight, if they go up 3-1, I think it's over. I think they'll win in five. So I think it's going to be Red Sox Dodgers. I think the Dodgers will come back. I think it'll be Red Sox Dodgers, and then prediction to win the World Series. I guess I'll have to go the Red Sox. I think they're hot at the right time. Everybody's playing accordingly, and I don't know. I don't think the Dodgers will beat them. So we'll see. I think it'll be a revenge, and I think Cora gets another ring. What do you think? Braves?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go with the Braves, like I said, but I do think the Red Sox kind of resemble that, team of destiny kind of vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to cite the 2019 Nationals a lot too because
Yeah,
they just like, and the Red Sox maybe aren't a good comp because they don't have the three-headed monster at the top of their pitching rotation, but
they were fun
when
to
it comes
watch.
to
That
the
2019 team.
mix of the mix of young guys that are really
Mm-hmm.
talented and the veterans, um, and then you have the certain players that are just playing out of their minds. And like Howie Kendrick was so good for them in the playoffs, and that's the Red Sox are getting production up and down that roster offensively. It's just a question of whether or not their bullpen deficiencies
Can you
and
keep
the
it up?
starting rotation.
Right. Can
Yeah.
you keep it up? And I think the last thing about them too is they've had 3 grand slams in a series that no team has ever done that. So when you're up 9-0, 8-0, you don't Cora doesn't have to sit there and worry about bullpen situations. He doesn't have to sit there and play chess and checkers as Dusty Baker sitting over there, you know, probably about to keel out and figuring out what he's going to do with his bullpen. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens tonight. I think that's it for baseball. So you covered the Jets. Obviously, they're off to another horrendous start. So what's it like around there? What's the vibe with Zach Wilson, Sala? Obviously, they signed Corey Davis in the offseason. They just don't seem like they can get it right. I don't think really it's Zach Wilson's fault because obviously he's still a rookie, and it just seems like another torrential downpour for the Jets for the next 10 years.
Well, I mean, I do think they're going in the right direction. I think that there's a lot of pressure on Joe Douglas to hit this next draft like
Hmm.
he potentially did this past year. Because a lot of the rookies that are on this team right now are, especially in the secondary, they're playing really well. Both Michael Carters are doing well, and we haven't even seen really what Elijah Moore is capable of just
Right.
yet. But when they have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, they have so many draft picks that you can really bolster this group with the veterans that they have, and they're not even a complete team at this point because they're
No.
missing Carl Lawson, Vinny Curry, all those guys for the year. Um, you find that perfect mix between building through the offensive and defensive lines and mixing the young talent with the veterans that are going to be able to mentor them and help them develop.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Zach Wilson has to make the throws and has to make the plays too. So we've seen the good and the bad from him so far. But I do think it's early to write off this group of
Yeah.
Sala, Wilson, LaFleur, all those guys. Um, Heading out of their bye week, I mean, they could beat the Patriots and be second place in the division. I mean, obviously contention is not going to happen this year,
Right.
but
Right.
they could really accelerate this rebuild if they um, falter down the stretch and still have a top 5 pick from them, and then the Seahawks continue to play poorly. They could have 2 top 10 picks, and that's a top defensive end and a top tackle, or
Right.
a top cornerback and a top tight end or something. I don't know. I mean, you can get
Right.
2 really good skill players at those positions. You don't have to worry about drafting a quarterback. You can continue to focus on the positions of need. And if those picks pan out, in 3 years, we could be talking about, a runaway favorite to win the division.
Yeah.
Um, the Bills are obviously really good, but
Yeah.
the Dolphins look like they're taking steps back, and the Patriots have some work to do as well. So,
Yeah, we got some work to do on the receiving end and some questionable play calling and decisions. But I really think Mac Jones is the real deal. And I think the Patriots lucked out with him a lot. If you've looked at his numbers and his grades, and they don't wow you, but statistically, he's obviously the best rookie this year, and he's played pretty well. Some pretty gutsy calls from the Patriots to go with him right off the bat. So I agree with you. I think Zach Wilson, obviously has a lot to improve on. He's shown flashes for sure. He has a really good arm. I think the Corey Davis connection, is working, somewhat. They're just getting Jamison Crowder back. I think now it's the second week back. So, I mean, the pieces are there. Obviously, the key to winning is a quarterback and an offensive line. I think it'll take time for them, but I think they have a really good tackle. He got hurt, didn't he? The guy on the outside.
Makai Becton, the
Makai Beckton
first round pick
from
last
Louisville.
year.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
got hurt, right? He's out now, right?
He'll be back eventually. Elijah
So
Vera Tucker, the guard they picked last year, he's been
yeah,
solid.
so they're going in
Uh,
the right direction, drafting offensive linemen. You got to draft an O line, just like the Dolphins need for Tua. They need an offensive line.
right. But the difference with all these young quarterbacks that we're seeing is, Zach Wilson has the qualities that you can't necessarily teach. And
Right.
he profiles as a prospect that could become Patrick
Hmm.
Mahomes, become Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if you can say the same about the other guys. I mean, obviously Trevor Lawrence is
Yeah.
up there as well in the top tier, but can Tua throw on the run down the field like Wilson can? Can Mac
No.
Jones do that? I don't really
No.
think so.
Mm-mm.
So what the Jets are able to work with is this guy that when he's playing off script, he's able to do magical things, but
Hmm.
he also has to fix the mistakes. A lot of interceptions so far, a lot of missed throws that are easy throws that a pocket passer would make.
Right.
So, you know, if you're patient, look at how good Sam Darnold has been. Obviously, he hasn't been perfect by any means, but
First 3 games, he
there have
was
been
really
some
good.
really quality performances, right? And he's
Yeah.
in a system that is um, setting him up for success with a better head coach and skill players around him.
Mhm.
So in 3-4 years, we might be looking at Wilson as we look at Josh Allen today as like one of the better
Right.
quarterbacks that can take a team to a Super Bowl with
Mhm.
the right group around them.
No, I completely agree with you, and I think that it's, definitely going to take time for him. And this rookie class, you can't write them off yet because it's their first season. It's not like Jameis Winston and Jared Goff or excuse me, Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. And Carson Wentz is having a resurging year. Right place, right system. Frank Reich, his old offensive coordinator in Philly. They have the pieces for him. They have a good offensive line. They got the running backs with Hines and Jonathan Taylor, and they got a good owner. So, I mean, that's really all it takes. But on the other side of the river, the Giants are an absolute mess. I don't know if it's really Daniel Jones's fault. I think it goes back to ownership, and I don't think Joe Judge is fit to be a head coach. I think he should have stayed as a special teams, coach in New England. I think he'll be finding his way back there very shortly after this season. So, what do you think about Daniel Jones and obviously in their offense?
It's almost like the Giants have kind of turned into the Jets in terms of just
Mm-hmm.
complete negativity.
Yeah.
At least there's a lot of hope and optimism about the Jets and the guys that they have, like we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if maybe the head coach isn't the right fit. Maybe the supporting cast isn't the right fit, and
Right.
penalties and unforced errors, all that stuff. That's going to really kill a team early on. And if they're not gelling off the field as well, I don't follow the Giants too closely, but
Right.
I've heard a lot about them, which isn't necessarily a
Absolutely.
good sign. So, I don't think they were going to really be a contender this year
No.
regardless. Maybe they were like 1 year away, maybe if everything worked out well.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with running backs in this league is you only get so many years with them before they start to get worn down. So Saquon Barkley obviously is very injury prone, but
That's what
you
I was
got to
just about
try
to bring
to
up. Yeah. And
surround him with the right group.
running
So
backs are a dime a dozen. I mean, look, Le'Veon Bell was, a star of the NFL for, what, 5, 6, 7 years, and now he was on the Ravens practice squad, this season, and now he found his way onto their roster. So running backs are a dime a dozen. And Christian McCaffrey's only played 6 games since 2019. Saquon can't stay healthy. Thank God for Derrick Henry, but Dalvin Cook can't stay healthy. So the running back position there's so many in the NFL. It's like, I don't think you need to start running back. And therefore, I don't think you should really pay them.
yeah,
But
I mean sometimes the best running backs are the guys that are just pesky out of the backfield
yep.
in screen passes and just in the flat. I mean, you think of
Mhm.
all those Patriots teams with Brady and
With James
what's
White,
his name,
Kevin Falk, Danny
Woodhead, right?
Woodhead,
Like,
Lawrence
yeah,
Maroney,
all those guys.
Kevin Falk, all those guys, they weren't big high draft guys. They were just found in the, like you said, a lot of it goes back to the system and you're drafting. You don't have to draft a first round guy and expect him to be you can draft him in the fourth or fifth round. Plenty of running backs.
That's the risk with taking a running back early on for sure.
I mean, it's panned out for the Steelers so far. I mean, they have a pretty good O line, and I mean, what Najee Harris is going to be a bust? I didn't think so. He had all the mechanics to be a really good running back. Not like Eddie Lacy. Well, Eddie Lacy was decent for a few years, but nothing like Trent Richardson. So, but Alabama breeds a group of running backs like every year. So it seems like every draft there's always a running back coming up here and there. So NBA talk real quick. Obviously, the NBA season starts tonight with Milwaukee and Brooklyn and the Lakers and the Warriors. The Lakers made a lot of splashes. It seems like you turn around every year and LeBron's in Space Jam and he's getting a new cast every year. So, do you think Lakers are going to win the finals? What about or the Nets?
It's a safe bet to pick
Mm-hmm.
that as a finals matchup. I mean, man, I first of all, I can't even believe the NBA is starting.
I
It
know
feels
it
like
turned around so fast. Milwaukee is the reigning, obviously, champions. They're not going to win it again this year. I don't think so. I think even with Brooklyn having just Kyrie, no Kyrie actually, Harden and Durant and the rest of their cast with rising star and Cam Thomas, I think they'll handle the Bucks for sure. I think they're the East favorite for sure. Sixers are a mess. Ben Simmons got kicked out of practice today for having his phone in his pocket. It was their Sixers are a mess. Embiid wants him gone. The Celtics are still a few years away. Miami could be a threat, but I just don't see it because I don't think. I mean, Jimmy Butler's a star, but I don't think they're better than the Nets. I think the Nets are the clear favorite in the East. What do you think?
Well, you mentioned the Heat. My family's from Miami, as much
Mm-hmm.
as I grew up in New York. So I grew up a Miami sports fan. Um, and I was, Dwayne Wade was my guy, and I was a
Yeah.
fan before LeBron and Bosh came. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember how they didn't click that first year. They
Yeah.
didn't win a title that
Oh,
first year.
don't even get me started about
But
that 2011 finals. Whew.
then they figured it out after that.
Right.
So I think you could use the same argument with this Nets team. Maybe they figure things out with Kyrie off the court.
Court. Yeah.
But either way, they have two superstar MVP caliber players and a
Mm-hmm.
really, really solid supporting cast too, with the veterans like Griffin and Aldridge
Mm-hmm.
and all those guys. So,
Yeah. Aldridge is back
you know,
surprisingly.
if they can get through those Eastern Conference team, like,
Mm-hmm.
you get a draw with the Hawks or the Heat in the first round, and who knows what happens. And then obviously the Bucks are still challenging just because of Giannis alone.
Yeah,
But if they
they're
could get
very good
the East,
defensively.
then maybe because the Lakers are such an old team, just
Yeah.
purely based on the age, maybe they'll
Mm-hmm.
be, kind of limping into the finals at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll pick the Nets. It'd be cool to see a championship here.
Yeah, actually,
Um,
for your sake, yeah.
it's been a while, yeah. But
Surprisingly, I wouldn't write off Phoenix just yet. I know they still have to pay DeAndre and then figure out that mess out with him. They paid Chris Paul. They just re-signed Landry Shamet, who was actually on the Nets last year, and I think he ended up on Phoenix. So they're still really good. They've got a good coach and a good system in Monty Williams and LeBron's good friend James Jones, who was actually on the Heat for quite some time, and he has 3 finals. So Suns are still a good team, but I think it'll be interesting to see and exciting. Warriors are going to be fun to watch. Hopefully, Klay Thompson will find his way back some point this year. Don't sleep on the Chicago Bulls. I know people are writing them off, but the season hasn't started yet, so I think they'll be a fun group to watch. So I think that's a safe pick from you for the Nets. I'm going to go Lakers, obviously, just because I'm a big LeBron fan. But yeah. So to
well, I mean, it's
yeah, go
it's
ahead.
cool to as you go through all those teams. It's cool because
Hmm.
when I was the Heat, it was the Heat. You knew the Heat were going to be in the finals, right? But
Yeah.
now I think maybe there's a lot more parity at this point because of all these young superstar. I mean, you didn't even mention Luka Doncic
No,
or
I didn't.
uh, Morant on the Grizzlies, right? Like
Yeah,
there are all these teams that are really fun to watch that can get into a postseason field that's really big, considering
absolutely.
how other sports have their postseasons. Um, it'll be a fun year. Some normalcy as well
Yeah.
after how weird things were with the pandemic too. So
Well, I could talk
I just I
about
love
yeah,
I love good basketball
me too.
at the end of games, close games. It's no matter who's playing.
I'm excited, but obviously, we can't sit here all day and talk about the Yankees and the MLB and the NFL and the NBA. I want to say thank you for coming on the Inquisitive Mamba podcast. But before you go, I like to end the show with 5 questions I like to rattle off. So, if my first question is if you could interview anybody in the sporting world or maybe outside of entertainment, who would it be?
That are alive today.
Yeah, they're alive.
Something. Okay. All right, alive. Wow, that's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. Um, I first guy that comes to mind is Dwayne Wade, just because I was just talking about him,
Okay.
and I love watching him as I grew up. But will be very cool to talk to Michael Jordan and
Yeah.
Barry Bonds about his path to greatness and the controversy there.
Hmm.
Um, I'll think of a football player too. Adam Vinatieri. That was
Oh,
one of
that'd
my
be a good
favorite
one.
players when I was a kid because I tried to kick when I was younger.
Okay.
There was really no football in like middle school, high school. I
Yeah.
grew up in the city, obviously, so
Hmm.
I would just do that in my free time, and I always loved watching him kick because he was so good and so consistent.
Alrighty. So
But
my
Tom Brady
second,
would
yeah,
be
go ahead. Go ahead.
awesome to talk.
Tom Brady would
No,
be
I was just use it.
no. Go
Yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
I,
So my second question for you is obviously you're a young journalist and I'm sure you write a lot and it's a lot of long hours covering a beat, obviously covering the Yankees. And what has been your most difficult aspect of your young journalism career so far?
yeah, it's been tough at times.
Hmm.
I do long distance with my girlfriend. I work crazy hours. Sometimes I don't get paid as much as I would like to.
Right.
Um, Social life has been hard,
Hmm.
not just because of work, but because of the pandemic too. So yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
I I try not to complain too much because sometimes I'll see people in the workplace that are older and are very jaded and have
Hmm.
been through it all, and they complain and focus on the negatives. Um, so what's been the hardest part? I guess I'd say just the grind, honestly. I mean, I run my sites. I don't have an editor. I don't have
Yeah.
too many contributors to work with. A lot of it is just on my shoulders every day. I haven't taken too many days off in the 2+ years that I've been doing this. So,
Hmm.
it's a grind, but it'll all be worth it. I mean, I'm only a couple years out of school at this point, so to be
Yeah.
able to do what I'm doing now, I'm very grateful for um, the amount of the path that I've
Yeah.
forged so far. I
Absolutely.
know there's a lot left, but it's been cool.
Well, I we got two more questions off. We are running out of time. I guess there's a timer on this. I just started this. Anyways, so if you could
All good.
cover any team in the sporting world, NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, what team would it be? Quickly.
Man, I mean, I think the Yankees, honestly.
Hmm.
I mean, I grew up following them so closely. It's
Yeah.
just so many stars, right?
Yeah.
Championship aspirations every year, so I'll go with that.
Okay. My next question is for you. Favorite food or spot in New York City? Then I got to wrap this up.
Okay, yeah. I always joke that I love Costco pizza. I don't know if you ever
Oh,
had
jeez.
Costco
Yeah, yeah,
pizza.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
have.
Um, I mean, I'll say pizza. New York pizza is my
Okay.
favorite thing, but
Alrighty. Yeah.
I love dollar slice too.
Okay. All right. Alrighty. So I want to say thank you guys to tuning into this podcast. Max, you did a wonderful job. Obviously, I could, close this outro forever, but I am running out of time. So make sure to follow us on Spotify, Instagram, TikTok. It is on Anchor. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts. And if you want to know what's up with the Yankees and the daily Jets news, follow Max T. Goodman on Twitter. He is a rising young sports journalist. And on that note, the Inquisitive Mamba is signing off.